Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, RockAuto.com, and State Farm. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thanks, Alec Webb, and welcome everyone to MotorWeek podcast number 159. And I'd also like to welcome WeatherTech, the laser-measured interior floor protection folks. They are our newest MotorWeek sponsor, and we want to welcome them to both MotorWeek on television and MotorWeek here on our podcast. And around our table today, we have Dave Scrivener, our executive producer and head writer.
Hello.
There he is.
Special
Q
guest.
Dave.
Special guest.
Our writer-producer,
new.
Brian Robinson.
What's up, John?
Our assistant road test producer, Greg Carlos.
Hey.
And our video producer and editor and the producer of our podcast, Joe Ligo.
Glad to be here.
And let's see, Joe's sitting over there monitoring our live on Facebook
big phone
telecast today. And so if you've got a question for us, if you're out there, make sure we know it. We're going to be doing a lightning round, viewer question, rant and rave. But first and foremost, we'll run down some vehicles and the fact that we are fresh back from the 2017 New York International Auto Show. So let's talk about that first. Okay, Dave Scrivener and I were actually at the show, and Greg Carlos and Brian were back here monitoring everything and putting stuff up on the internet and doing the scripts. Start with you, Greg. From afar, what was the most impressive vehicle that you saw at the show, or the most notable?
I mean, I don't think I could call myself a car enthusiast without mentioning the Dodge Demon first. I mean, that actually was revealed the night before, which seems like everybody's doing now. We've talked about that every other auto show. That thing was made quite the show, and after months of teasing, we finally got to see something. So for me, that was finally the payoff.
840 horsepower and lots of smoke.
And they kept saying that it's actually NHRA. It's illegal if you run it NHRA because it's under 10 seconds.
It's too fast, man.
You technically need a roll cage for that, but nobody's going to be running under 10 seconds.
Yeah, I wonder how quickly we're going to actually get to put that claim to the test. Dave Scrivener, you walked around the floor like I did and pretty much wore out your shoes.
I spent most of the day with the TV crew shooting all the cars. We shot like 48 cars for the segment coming up.
Anything just knock your socks off?
I like, being an old fart, I like the Buick Regals, that the wagon they have now.
The
and
Tourex.
Tourex.
Is it necessary to
And
be
the
an old
sport
fart to like a Buick?
I don't think so.
It's
I
a
think the
beautiful
styling was
car.
great for those things.
And the Sportback hatchback had a huge cargo bay.
Now, do we call that a hatchback
It
or
was-
a liftback
it
or
was
a
a
fastback?
well,
What's the?
I consider it a hatchback. I don't know.
I call it a 5-door hatch.
Yeah.
So, but that's kind of neat.
But I'm not sure what the market is for wagons anymore. I mean, as beautiful as it is, are they going to sell a wagon or one bunch
You
of
know,
crossovers?
Outback does pretty well for Subaru, and I think they're looking to give them a little bit of competition, but I can't imagine that they expect they'll sell that many, but I don't know.
Will it be an all-wheel drive version of
Yes,
it?
that's what the Tourex is. It comes standard with it. Now, the hatchback you can get in front drive or all-wheel drive. Brian Robinson, anything strike your fancy?
I was intrigued by the Lincoln.
The Navigator.
Yes, Navigator. When it first came out, it was kind of same time as the Escalade came out, but the Escalade has pretty much owned that market. So I'll be interested to see if Lincoln can kind of claim a a bit.
It sure is big.
Big and blocky. Is that styling of
It's
Don't know what to
blocky.
say.
It's
conservative
big,
buyer?
but it's all
big.
aluminum. It's lighter weight.
It's got the Raptors twin turbo 6 in there.
It's got all the space inside that the Expedition
When
has.
I talked about it on our various social media, the biggest comment is always, and this goes to the Continental too. It's like, I want the V8. I don't want a turbo V6. It just seems like most people, when they think of a Lincoln, they need a V8 or want a V8, and I can't say I blame them.
Is that a victim of cafe standards, having to go to the 6s now?
Yeah, I'm sure.
I think with a Navigator like the Continental, the interesting part is the inside. I'm kind of the exterior is just kind of like underwhelming for me, but the interior is the cool part.
Well,
Those
that was the
blue leather
whole idea of
seats.
the concept when they had the gull wing doors on it, which this one does not have, by the way.
Yeah, no steps that fold out.
SUVs were clearly everywhere. The most interesting, I thought, was the finally, Genesis is rolling out its SUV. The first one will be their biggest one, the QV80, which sort of seems like a
GV80.
GV80. Sorry, I've got
Infiniti on the
Infiniti
mind.
QX80 on the brain.
Well, that's
and that
probably on
seems-
purpose.
And I think that's exactly on purpose. Over Infiniti, they had a QX80 monograph or concept, which was okay. But the Genesis I thought was very interesting.
Moving right along.
Take that as you will.
It was a hydrogen fuel cell powered, but of course that's not going to be the way it is. But it was a good looking vehicle, but it was awfully big. And let's see, Range Rover brought the Velar, which they had already shown in Geneva. And but yeah, Navigator was pretty
Subaru.
impressive. Oh,
Subaru
Subaru!
Ascent.
Subaru brought
Ascent.
unveiled a 3-row SUV, the Ascent.
It's
very
big,
very
too.
bold styling for Subaru.
Tell your story.
I managed to bump into Ralph Gilles, the chief designer for FCA, and asked his opinion of it. He said, "Well, it certainly is bold. I would have had my designers lift the pen a little sooner." That's what he said. So
that was a great comment. All right, so New York International Auto Show, I think collectively, Dave and I thought it was a very, very solid show. And frankly, that now gives us a couple of really good shows.
Yeah, we have a viewer question here. Michael wants to know, and I think I already know the answer. Was there anything about a Jeep Wrangler pickup? People are dying to know.
Well, we all know it's coming. There wasn't anything there about it. The
nothing
only
at the
thing
show
they had
that-
was the Trackhawk, which is the
They had
707
two trim
horsepower.
editions of the Jeep Wrangler. They had the Chief, which was a bright retro blue color, and they had.
But nothing on a new Wrangler. The Trackhawk was Jeep's
Well, we know
biggest
that
thing.
we know there's been lots of spy photos of the new Wrangler coming out. We know that they're going to be building a pickup. It's just I think 19 is the target date, so probably we'll see it. Frankly, along with the new Ranger at Detroit's Auto Show next
I think what
January.
what we don't know is whether it's going to be on that Wrangler
Right.
platform or just on a Ram platform. Yeah.
One rumor had it being built in the same plant as they're converting to Ram, so
Yeah.
that would make it being on a full frame platform.
I mean,
so I don't
if
think
they
anybody
made
knows.
a new Dakota-sized Ram to compete with Chevy and Ranger and all that stuff, I mean, I guess it would make sense to have a Jeep version, wouldn't it?
I don't know if even half the people that are constantly on the internet talking about it buy one. They'll sell
Yeah, that's the problem. Is everybody talks about it and then they'll sell.
And the
not
new
that many.
Ranger
It's going to be too expensive. That's why.
And the Ranger's going to be almost as big. I mean, the Ranger's going to be like the Colorado and Canyon. It's not. It's hardly going to be a mid-sized truck. I mean, it's going to be pretty big.
Back to the Trackhawk for a second. That was certainly a showstopper in my book. The 707 horsepower all-wheel drive Grand Cherokee.
Is that? I guess that's going to be another one above the SRT. They're still going to have the SRT, right?
Yeah, but they didn't put the SRT name in it. I mean, they've got the SRT
Right.
name in
Like
the
the
Demon,
Demon had,
but they didn't
right.
put the SRT name in the
Interesting.
Trackhawk.
And I saw the engineer for the Jeep Cherokee there, or Grand Wagoneer Cherokee, and he said it might be a better track car than the Challenger Hellcat because of the all-wheel drive system. It won't be sideways all the time. It'll actually just grip and go and hit the gas.
4 patches. A vehicle that really was at New York, was at New York last year, and we finally got our chance to actually spend more than a few minutes with it, is the 2017 Lincoln Continental. I guess my question is, with all the hype, with the concepts, the fact that they were rolling them out and selling them as fast as they can, but they really basically didn't make them widely available to the press right away, how did we feel about the Continental once we got in it? Who wants to start, Brian?
I thought mostly positive. I mean, I think it looks great, with the exception of a few interior details that were maybe disappointing. Overall, I thought it was good. The ride, I think, was the real highlight for me. I mean, it rode like you would want a Lincoln flagship to ride, something that they haven't had for quite a while.
Greg?
Yeah, I came away impressed by it. I think I was maybe a little less enamored than some of the other staffers about the interior. I was probably one of the first to pick out some of the things I didn't like. There's some cheapest feeling material, cheapest looking material.
Like the dash pad.
Yeah, and even the switch gear, some of that just didn't feel great. But it's well laid out. There's good redundant controls. They finally figured out their sync system. It works better. I mean, that's been in Ford products. Rode well, a ton of power from the V6.
You know, it was interesting when you took a corner, the car would sort of like dive a little bit, like it was a real soft suspension, but then it stiffened right up and you got through quite well. I mean, it was a lot sportier, a lot more enjoyable to drive than I thought it would be.
Yeah, it reacted well. I think the steering was a little heavier than I was expecting, and that was all the time, even when you were just in a parking lot.
I thought they did a really good job of putting a lot of redundant buttons and so forth, so you could either do the touchscreen or that. And I would like to think that Cadillac ought to be looking at that because they've gone the other way with so minimal controls. I thought the Lincoln did a good job.
What do you think of the seats? I know we are in and out of cars so much, it's hard to find that comfort zone. And with this one, there's like a million different configurations, so I was never able to find it. But it's. I mean, if you had time to,
I think if you were an owner, you could probably do it.
It is
stick it
the
in the memory.
most adjustable seat on sale right now or something. I know I was talking on Twitter. The people who supply the components to Lincoln, I got into a conversation with them on Twitter, and yeah, they said it's the most complicated seat mechanism they've ever built.
I believe it.
Which, I mean, it did have like 30 different types of adjustments. So
It was certainly comfortable. I drive the Beltway every day, and it was very comfortable for me. I didn't spend a whole lot of time adjusting it. I kind of just get in the car and go and make sure I can reach the pedals.
I think our overall impression was that it was a much better car than we expected. However, when you start talking about, loading it up and you're getting way up there in price, you wonder if it's quite up to some of its European competition, but it's much better than I think we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, good for Lincoln.
Speaking of Europe, we have a question for one of our viewers on Facebook Live. Brian wants to know...
Brian's right here.
No, different Brian. Different Brian wants to know that, since Lincoln is kind of showing a renewed enthusiasm, is there going to be any kind of Continental coupes or anything to compete with European brands? Coupes are a big...
Well, sure. If you look at what Cadillac did. It took Cadillac, 15 years to do a quote-unquote comeback, and after they got all the basics out, then they did a coupe, which doesn't sell
Ready for
very
a Mark
well.
10?
Who knows?
The way the industry is going, they'll probably make a coupe. They'll make a two-door coupe, and then they'll put 4 doors on the 2-door coupe and still call it a coupe.
And they'll lift it and call it like a cross coupe.
The Lincoln version of the Mustang, I think, would be awesome.
Oh, well, yeah. Like Dave said, a Mark 10,
All right, let's move on to a real futuristic car that's here today, the 2017 Honda Clarity fuel cell. Greg, we just talked about, we didn't talk about it, but at the auto show in New York, they've actually added both a plug-in hybrid and a pure EV to the Clarity lineup. But you've actually spent time in the first model out, the Clarity fuel cell. Impressions. I mean, a lot of people think that a fuel cell vehicle is somehow a new animal, when in reality it's basically an EV that uses a fuel cell for power instead of batteries. But it didn't exactly drive like a pure EV, did it?
No, it's definitely different. And that comes from stepping on the accelerator. In an EV, you get all the power instantly, and it really comes on pretty hard. In this one, it's a little bit more linear. There is some pretty good torque down low, which I was excited about, but it's more linear. You got to step into it, and it'll grow and grow and grow. And that's what most people are used to in a gas-powered car. One of the biggest feats is really that this is like an Accord level of space here. I mean, they've moved the fuel cell unit up front.
It's all under the hood now.
Right, yeah, it's all under the hood. They've and another big problem is the tank itself for the hydrogen has to be pretty big. They've added another one, a smaller one, and it goes under the rear seat. So the rear seat room is phenomenal. I mean,
you don't have a big battery pack.
Right, I had great leg room. Headroom was fine. So I was impressed with how much it felt just like a standard big sedan. The unfortunate thing is, I mean, if you really want one, you got to live in California.
And the styling is not
Well,
mainstream at
I
all.
wanted to ask about the styling. It's got like these fender skirts and other weird stuff. I mean, do you think they're trying to make it look futuristic on purpose?
Oh, that's all aero.
Or is it? Yeah, I was going to say,
it's
how much of it
aero.
is function? How much of it is...
They say it's all function. I mean, they have air curtains going around. There's air flowing all over the place, and they really go through in depth and tell you what everything is for. And I agreed with Dave. I still don't really like the styling, but it grew on me after looking at it. And
The
maybe
fender
it was
skirts just kill me in the back. It just looks too
Like
dopey.
an old Cadillac.
That's hard to get used to.
When you look at the fact that they have, at least they're saying that they're they're going to have a clarity for everybody. I have to say I'm impressed with that, even though we all acknowledge their EV with an 80-mile range is hardly competitive with a lot of the other things
in the
out
game
there.
at least.
They admit that their volume vehicle is going to be the plug-in hybrid. But getting back to fuel cells, you've got the Toyota Mirai, you've got the Tucson hybrid from Hyundai, you've got this. They're available. There's no infrastructure for fuel. And I don't think America is alone in that. What are automakers doing? Why are they putting so much emphasis on this? I mean, this vehicle took a ton of development money.
Yeah. I mean, General Motors had a was it Equinox? They had hydrogen fuel cell for modeling around, testing them, and it went nowhere. I haven't seen one. And
the way Honda was describing it, and I'll try to do my best to remember as it was a couple of weeks ago, is that they see the problem of energy as not being a one solution problem.
Granted.
Everyone's saying that.
I think
multi-solution
that's
there's no silver
reasonable.
bullet.
Right. So it's like, let's try and develop this technology and maybe it'll take off, but we at least have to explore it and try and make it work. We can't just immediately assume it's not going to work. And I think that's how they're approaching it.
And the other advantage over the EV is that it's over 300 miles of range, and you can refuel it in 5 minutes versus
If you
plugging
find a
it in.
station.
It has
overnight.
more
Correct.
range than any electric car you can buy today.
If the stations
Including
show
the
up, they
top
have one
Tesla.
ready for it.
Well, and then the other thing about development dollars, aside from the fuel cell and the hydrogen tanks, all the electric motor and transmission, all that stuff, they could put into a battery EV.
Which they are.
So I guess maybe their management's
Going
thinking,
modular with a power source.
right? Management's thinking, well, even if the fuel cell doesn't work out, all the money we spend on the rest of the powertrain is not lost. If
And
they
I think that's
make
exactly right. They made a big deal at the auto show by saying really everything's under the hood, just like, and we can put, that means we can take that powertrain, and they were probably talking about the hybrid powertrain as much, and put it in any other vehicle, because they've already said, look for a Ridgeline that's a plug-in hybrid. Look for plug-in hybrids across their lineup, because they've now got this packaging worked
Certainly
out.
a CRV would be a candidate for.
And the hydrogen, another little incentive there is that if you buy the Clarity, you don't have to pay for fuel because they give you right off the bat $15,000 towards fuel costs, because hydrogen is more expensive when you compare it to gasoline.
Really? So you
Yeah.
get free fuel for how far does
It's
15 grand to get
it's
you?
a 3-year lease, and they say that the $15,000 should cover you for the 3 years.
Gosh, that means from totally free fuel.
Because it's
really.
also you're limited on mileage.
You're tied to that
Right.
stations too.
It makes me want to move to LA. No, not really.
Not really. All right, let's move along actually to the next segment in today's podcast, our lightning round.
Oh,
2
boy.
minutes. We give ourselves to debate a trending automotive topic, and at the time, Joe will cut us off when we get there. Okay, we talked about the Regal a little bit, so let's go back to it. 2018 Buick Regal. It's going to be in a liftback called the Regal Sportback, as well as the Tour X. Why are they doing it? Well, there's no Regal sedan. They're following Chrysler with the 200, dropping the sedan. Lots of people think other sedans, mid-size sedans, might be on life support because mid-size sedans have been falling. Is this really the demise of the sedan, or is it just this particular size of sedan, the mid-size? What's your sense of where America is going, as if we didn't already know? Brian?
I'm definitely not a predictor of trends or even follower of current trends, but it's hard to say. I don't think the sedan's going away. Most of it, to me, seems all about marketing. We call sedans coupes and coupe sedans and hatchbacks crossovers. So I don't know. I think there'll always be a place for a four-door.
And I think the sedan being lower to the ground for the older folks who can't get into an SUV or a crossover. My mother can't get into one. She drives a sedan now, and she needs that just for access to it.
I think that's actually part of the appeal of the Buick Tour X.
As the
Regal
population
Tour X.
ages, they can still get utility for their wheelchairs or walkers.
Greg,
But
is
what
it all
about getting out of the
crossovers
car?
all the
'Cause you got to
time?
get out though. I mean, to talk. So, sorry, what was?
Is
what
it
was the
all
question?
crossovers all the time now? for
I
Americans?
think for my generation it is, honestly. I don't see anybody who really goes out and looks for a sedan. I think maybe they fall into the sedan category once they go out and look and realize, well, I can get this.
I can
cheaper.
afford a sedan
Exactly.
versus a crossover.
But I think most
They are
people my
bargains.
age go out and look for the crossovers. They want to sit up high. They want all-wheel drive in this area.
But go and get a second car as they get a family and a couple of kids. They want crossovers for luggage space.
So I don't see a sedan totally going away, but I mean, think about it. We didn't even talk about sedans at the auto show.
No,
there
we
was
didn't. There were several.
The Sonata,
TLX was
refreshed
refreshed.
Sonata,
Sonata
TLX.
refreshed.
Yeah.
Joe, any
I mean,
comments?
people are really good at convincing themselves they need a crossover. I mean, I've talked
Because they think they need four-wheel drive.
Right, or because they the room or like a friend of mine just bought a Subaru Crosstrek and we have a long-term one. It's great. I love driving it, but I personally own an Impreza and I would not pay the extra $3,000 for a Crosstrek just for ground clearance and fender flares. But he was so convinced when he bought it that he needed that extra. Oh, well, I might go camping, or I
Or I
have
might
a
go buy a
dog.
big box TV.
Right, and the thing
My
is,
wife's convinced she wants all-wheel drive in our next car. We're
the
shopping for one now.
You know, the Crosstrek and the Impreza are literally the same interior volume and the same all-wheel drive system. It's just that little bit of ground clearance that he was willing to spend that
Well,
extra
for my
money.
wife, it's the sitting position to sit up higher and see traffic better, not feel lost down the shuffle like in a Mazda 3 we have also.
True.
It's just too low to the ground for her vision. She drives the Continental and loves it sitting up high.
My soapbox is that the sedan is not dead, but what's happened is mid-size sedans have gotten so big, they're now as big as full-size cars used to be, which was never a huge market. And the compacts are now basically what we used to call mid-size. Many of them qualify as mid-size. And the compact sedan market's still actually doing pretty well.
I think that might be where all the mid-sized sedan
I
sales
think
have gone.
the mid-size people are saying more money for that. I can go buy a crossover or an SUV. You know, we're almost to the point of even retiring the crossover name now because everybody calls them SUVs. Anyway, how are we doing on time there, Joe?
That was it, yeah.
We're
That was
long
That was a way
past.
to wrap it
Yeah,
up.
that was
All
just
right,
under 3.
that was good. Viewer question. This one's from Jim in California. When we're not traveling, our 99 F-250 stays nice and safe in our garage. We have babied it from the first day we purchased it in '98. However, we often volunteer at campground as campground hosts and have to battle critters from seeking warmth, gnawing on the wires, or gathering nesting materials from our engine's underbay hood insulation. Can you offer any tips about keeping chipmunks and other uninvited guests from hopping aboard? Dave Scrivener, you know a lot about this.
I'm working on this very question for a Goss segment coming up. We'll be hitting it in June. And there are several devices, like ultrasonic devices, that will emit the noise they don't like. And I found, interestingly, Honda sells or markets a Honda-branded tape infused with capsaicin, which is the stuff in hot peppers that makes you burn your tongue. They wrap it around this tape, and then the mice won't gnaw into it because it drives them
Do
crazy.
you wrap it around the wires?
The
or
wiring
perimeter of
looms
the
and
car?
things like not the
Just
whole
wrap
car
the
in
whole
it.
car in it? Yeah.
I think the problem is they're using soy-based insulation for the wires to be green and seat fabrics and all kinds of stuff under the hood. It's mouse food.
I've been living
hey.
with it in a 2003 Ranger, and every year for the last 3 years, I've had something gnawing through something because it sits outside. It was electric wires one year. Last year was emissions hose, and this year I don't know what it is, but the dash lights are back on again.
They do say if you use the stuff to warn your mechanic that there is pepper spray under the hood, they wear gloves or something from the car. They don't
Now,
burn
it is
themselves.
a case, though. It's not just like these people have dirty car interiors and mice are going in to get crumbs. It's like the engine bay.
The
where
actual
the
car
damage is.
itself is now food.
Yeah,
mouse
the
is
car
mine.
is food. There are
No wonder my
materials
mouth
you
waters when
can.
I'm close to cars now.
There are materials you can wrap around hoses and so forth that are like, like a steel wool, but I don't know.
Even
Bronze wool doesn't rust, so we've used
Yeah,
that
bronze
to
wool.
chink the cracks in your garage. Maybe don't put food in your garage.
Aluminum foil
obviously.
works as well. I know squirrels and chipmunks will get after your gas lines on your gas grill because they like that rubber on those as well. And people say wrap those in aluminum foil that keeps them away. So
That's a good piece
Yeah,
of
we
advice.
had the same problem. My dad had a backhoe that groundhog climbed up inside and decided to have a snack and then die, and then I had to help clean it out. And then
Thank
go
you,
in
Joe,
and
for
fix
that.
all
Way
the
to bring
wires.
us all down, Joe.
See, his excuse
up
was
death.
you have smaller hands, so you can reach in there and fix all the wires, and I don't have to. So I was the lucky guy on that
Jim,
one.
I hope that gives you a little bit of insight. Not sure if it was too much useful information, but go out and get some hot peppers. Rant and raves. Anybody want to add anything to our normal list of looking at just how awful people drive these days?
I had a scenario yesterday in a parking lot. So we'll talk about parking lot etiquette. I had pulled into a space, and at the end of every row of spaces, there's that hashed out spot where they do not want you to park.
And everybody always
For
parks
a reason,
there.
right? See, somebody had parked there, I guess, assuming because I don't want to cross the 20 feet street and then park over there and walk the extra bit. So they had parked directly behind me, and as I'm backing out our Pacifica, I got to make a 3-point back out because there's just no space. So I understand you want to get the best possible parking space, and everybody has that feeling, oh, well, the rules don't apply to me because I follow every other rule. Well, there's a reason these rules are here, and it's really courteous to other people if you can just follow them as best you can.
People, yesterday coming off the train from New York, we come out and we're trying to load the crew into whatever I was driving, the CX-9, and here's this fellow waiting for someone from the train, and he pulls up about 7 feet from the curb, halfway across the lane. His door's open. He's out on his phone. The buses taking people from the train he's in the crosswalk. They can't turn. He's absolutely oblivious. Just stands there, big smile on his face. And it's like, we're all like, dude, you're blocking the street. The buses can't turn. You're acres from the curb. There's no etiquette.
So,
there's no common sense.
But do you think that's like pleading ignorance? Because maybe he's somebody who does. Because we all travel a lot, and we all
ignorant
know
is a good word.
Yeah, it's just and I'm not excusing it, but maybe it's just that he just doesn't know. And I find myself getting mad at people like this too. Like at the airport, the same thing. If you don't know how to go through security, because I go through it way more than most people do, and then you get mad at them just because they don't know.
Well, I think you're being very.
I think
very,
the mindset people
kind.
I think the mindset people have is I've forgiven so many other people for bad driving. I'm allowed to be a bad driver.
You're right. If you want to
So I think that's the problem. You think I've put up with this for so long, it's my turn to be a bad driver, and I think that's what they do.
People are just oblivious. I've had it twice in the last week in the town I live in. Trying to parallel park. You signal way ahead of time. People are right on your bumper. And by the time you get to where you can pull in, they're right on your bumper. Someone's right on their bumper. And you literally can't park. So then you got to go around the block.
Because they're not paying attention.
People aren't paying attention.
And then the third person's like, ooh, spot.
Yeah. It's like,
Well, even when you're parked, since we're
pull
on
in.
that, what gets me is the people that, thank goodness, most cars now have backup cameras and sensors because they will walk. You've got your backup lights on, you're in reverse, they walk right behind you. They don't. They're pulling their children with them. There's
And on a cell phone.
concept. And they're on their cell phone.
Rear cross traffic alert, I swear, is my favorite technology,
I think. Yeah, listen to the beeps. Well, that was a very good one. I want to thank everybody around the table for a very good rant and rave session, as long with the rest of the podcast today. And I want to thank our newest sponsor on MotorWeek, WeatherTech, for coming on board, and our audio engineer, who is Dave Wainwright today. And Dave's making sure that we're sounding loud and clear. Our podcast creator, Bob Mixter. And of course, we mentioned that Joe Ligo is our podcast producer. To all of you out there, thanks very much for listening to our podcast and for being big fans of MotorWeek on public television stations, Velocity, and on YouTube. Till next time, I'm John Davis. For all of us at MotorWeek, what's the old saying from Hill Street Blues? Be careful out there.
Yes.
We'll see you then.
See you then.
You have been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, RockAuto.com, and State Farm.